Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Melanin Margin. I'm your host, Quaviondre Williams.
And I'm Daquon Wilson.
And this is the talk show dedicated to bringing the marginalized to the spotlight and uplift the Black voices that will no longer stay silent, baby. We back for another season. So let's get into this week's race conversation, recovering from injustice. Now, Daquon, do we think that it's too soon to celebrate this Derek Chauvin verdict?
I think that there's levels to this. we can celebrate a battle, but we have to know that the war is not over. Like, this is one small infinitesimal step in the grand scheme of like getting rid of and fighting injustice. If this is even a step in the first place, because I'm not trying to be overly pessimistic, but the way I see it is this is a pivotal moment in both narratives. We finally get a guilty verdict. And so, like, after all of these different trials that we've seen where people got to walk off with no consequences whatsoever, finally we see something where it's like, hey, this person is guilty. And this starts a precedent moving forward that's like, hey, if this person is guilty, then all of these other people should be guilty as well. But also, I think that on the flip side of things, I think this is also going to start this narrative of like, oh, well, like, y'all got the guilty verdict, like, y'all good, the police and the justice system is doing what it should be, so it's not broken. But in reality, we still know that there are still problems within our criminal justice system, and one guilty verdict is not going to solve that.
I completely agree. I found myself very hesitant about celebrating this because at first I was like, yes, finally we're making a move in the right direction. But like you said, the second thought after that initial one was like, oh no, because at the same time, in the same vein, people could argue that a sentence is enough. Like, a verdict is enough. And just having the jury state that he is guilty of murder is enough, and there's no need to move any further than that.
Right.
And we've seen more times than many that being given a guilty verdict does not always mean getting a punishment. Right. And a lot of what I was seeing was like, part of me was very nervous because all I could keep thinking about was, is the only reason that he was given a guilty verdict is because of the pressure in society around. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
Because the George Floyd situation, everyone is if you have to be under a rock not to know what was going on with that. And so it kind of makes me feel a little bit hesitant because of the fact that, yes, the jury said that this person was guilty, but is it only because he was one of those people, the person that died, their death was so well broadcast?
Mm.
Will this energy be kept up if somebody isn't a hashtag?
Right.
Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I totally get that. And I agree 100%. I think it's one of those situations where, this past summer, there were movements across the world. Like, literally, the entire world was looking at the US in this moment and seeing what they were going to do. So I do agree that, like, there was this pressure because of how broadcast it was. And I think in general, when we see issues of injustice, we see more talking about it. We see more conversations now because there is that pressure. Everything's being recorded. Everything's being posted on social media. You're getting the message and what's happening across to so many people. And it's such more publicized now. So we do have more conversations around it. And that creates this pressure that wasn't necessarily there beforehand because these issues weren't getting that media spotlight. It was just the status quo, like, oh, this happened, we're not going to talk about it because it's just normal. So I do think that there was this pressure, as well as just like this idea that, you know, maybe if we do this one thing, everybody's going to see it. And then it's like, all right, we good. Like, crack the code. Now we can share this with everybody. Y'all shared the thing before. Share
Yeah.
this with everybody about the guilty verdict so that we don't look as bad. And it's like, y'all are trying to recover from like a PR stunt or something like that.
And honestly, Daquon, like you said, not to be pessimistic, but that's kind of what this feels like. I want to go back to what you said about setting a precedent. And when I looked at the trial, or when I looked at the video of the announcing of the verdict, and you saw Derek Chauvin's reaction, and he was genuinely surprised that he got a guilty verdict. Like he was there in his mind, or from what we could see, just like, oh, I didn't think this is actually going to happen. And when I saw that, all I could think was, is this white supremacy, like you said, using him as a sacrificial lamb? Like, we'll let him take this guilty verdict and let people think that we are making a change, when in reality, we're just going to let this one suffer so that the many doesn't suffer. So we're going to let this one person get quote unquote justice, in their eyes, a suffering for a crime, even though they won't ever have to actually hold anybody else accountable for that same crime. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think that is one of these things where it's like, oh, he's just the sacrifice so that white
Yeah,
supremacy can go on.
it's like this way of saying, like, okay, we'll give up this one agent in order to protect all the other agents. So if we get them to say guilty verdict, and if I don't know if we will, but if we do get a sentencing for him that actually does match the crime that he's committed, will white people start to argue like, well, we can't compare this to Derek Chauvin because we can't, this person got away with it, but Derek Chauvin didn't get away with it, or, this person got away with it, this person did it, but Derek Chauvin, it's like, it gives them that fodder that they need to, like you said, continue to perpetuate this white supremacy. It's a way to keep them in power, because as long as everyone is focused on the fact that Derek Chauvin is being taken down, or Derek Chauvin is getting the quote unquote backlash, but the others who actually are doing more malicious things than what he has done, like the other people who helped him murder George Floyd. So it's just that kind of idea of like, it's like you said, it feels slightly performative to an extent, because and I hope that I'm wrong. I really hope that I'm wrong. I really hope that this is, like you said, a precedent that is going to change the way we look at police brutality, that we look at police force and all that good stuff. I hope that this is exactly what we think it is. But we have had way too much experience as African Americans in failures of those things, like with interracial marriages being legalized, and people still being second guessing that whole thing, or when slavery was abolished, people still was treating black people a certain way, and civil rights movements like that. Like, we've seen this repetition throughout history, time and time again, where we get a little bit, but then we take 2 steps forward, only get knocked 10 steps back.
Right.
And yes, we're making movement, but we're still kind of set in this certain place. It's like we can't ever reach the finish line.
Yeah, and this brings up like this question of like, is this true accountability? Is Chauvin being hold accountable for his actions? And is this verdict justice for George Floyd and his family and all of the Black people that have to fear the police every single day?
Yeah, I do think it is. I think it is just that Derek Chauvin has been given a guilty verdict, and I hope that when they sentence him, that is also a just punishment. And I do believe that the family of George Floyd definitely deserves that closure and definitely deserves that justice. The problem is, are they going to be the only ones who get it?
Exactly. I
And
think that
that's
is one of those things where, you have such a small thing that happens, we don't even know the full scope of sentencing yet, and we're like celebrating it. Like, who knows how easy that sentence could be, or the ways he can, appeal the sentence or find ways to get out of the sentence, or even in being in jail, what the connections to the police is going to be to have him have an easier time or something like that. So like, for me, it's justice. I do think that like
Yes,
it needed to happen, but in
absolutely.
the broad scope of things, is everybody getting justice in this situation? Are we creating a just entire criminal justice system?
And I think that with this, and I think that the sentencing is going to be really telling of that. And not just the sentencing, but after the aftermath of the sentencing. Because even if, like you just said, even if he is given the correct, just sentence for taking a man's life intentionally, I think that in this situation, it can always be appealed.
Mm-hmm.
And there's always a way, there's always white tape, and there's always behind the scenes things that we don't see. And so my thing is, even if we do get the sentence, and even if we do get the right one, will in a year after, he serves a year of prison time and he appeals it and gets an appeal because they're like, okay, now nobody's talking about you, so we can bring you back into the fold. You
Right.
see what I'm saying?
Yeah. It's one of those things that there is just so many different loopholes and everything that's embedded into our criminal justice system that like the sentence isn't the end all be all.
Yeah, so I want to ask you, do you think that if we did get the proper sentencing and if Derek Chauvin did actually serve that time, do you think that this could change the way that prosecuting these kinds of crimes will go in the future? Or is it's like we just discussed, is it just going to be a distraction from the larger the issue?
I think that it's a mix of both. I think that like I said before, like this could start some type of precedent in being like, hey, like there is this precedent that like whatever police like secret code that we have is not enough to save you. And so it could create this precedent to be more um convicting on officers that do use unnecessary force, especially upon Black people. But I do think that it's also one of those things, like we said before, where it could just be, oh, sacrificial lamb, let's move on. Um, and I do see like some, politics and like laws being made and passed to like try to not counteract the before precedent of just like,
Yeah.
oh, just like let's sweep it under the rug and get through with it. But there have been laws like the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act that was passed by the House, and I think it's still going through like the Senate and waiting for like the president to look at it. And it's supposed to be aimed at increasing law enforcement accountability,
Yeah.
ending things like no-knock warrants, banning chokeholds, and creating a national registry for police misconduct, and seeking to end that qualified immunity that police officers have. So there is this hope that, with these new laws and everything that's being put in place, that this precedent can stand and that we can get more justice in the future. But the real question is, is the policy going to work? Is the policy going to be enacted
Enforced.
and enforced?
And
Yeah.
that's the main thing. And I fully agree. And I think it's frustrating because, as Black people, we shouldn't have to be this pessimistic. Like, we shouldn't have to feel like, is this really going to be this, or is it really going to be that? But like I said, it's this feeling of like, yes, I'm excited, and yes, it does, like we're moving in a better direction, but it's like we still don't have all the information. And it's like, it's one of those things where I'm still anticipating the next ball to drop, if you will. And it's like, it's one of those things especially with the Emmett Till anti-lynching bill still being on the Senate floor. because people want to ratify that and change that or whatever the case to be. But the AAPI bill, which I'm very happy was passed, but it's like this, the Emmett Till bill is still in the air. And no one's really talking about it, and no one's really kind of bringing light to that. And it's like, it seems as though when African Americans voice our anger or frustration with the government and try to enact some kind of change in the government, it's oftentimes, like I said, they'll placate us. Like, the bill is there. It's still in processing.
Be like, we're working on it.
Yes, it's the consistent, we'll call you. We'll call you when we get more information. It's still processing, but give us time. We're working on it. And it's like I said, it's almost like a pacifier. And that's why I said that I absolutely am great. I am thankful that we have seen this guilty verdict. I am hoping that this George Floyd's family gets the justice that they absolutely deserve. But like I said, I just can't not think about the fact that, like, there are so many other George Floyds. There are so many other Trayvon Martins. There are so many other Breonna Taylors whose family does not even get that justice, or who does not even get that kind of media attention. And their daughters and sons and nieces and nephews and brothers and sisters are just gone. And they're just dealing with the aftermath of it, with no promise of any kind of reparation from it. You know what I mean? And it just frustrates me, because my thing is, okay, now that we've got this, are we going to be able to start prosecuting people beforehand, people who couldn't be prosecuted before, because of a certain kind of, like you said, qualified immunity they have, because it was necessary this and necessary that and whatever. Like, does this, will it be like a statute of limitations kind of thing? Like, these are the questions that are running through my mind. And like, it just makes me so, like I said, hesitant to fully celebrate, because it is not the first time that we have fought, and the government has only given us a very surface level change, very surface level justice,
right?
But allow for the deeper ocean, the deeper iceberg of injustice to remain as is. Because to dismantle it all would mean to break down a lot more things than they're willing to actually do the work for.
And I think at the end of the day, like, you know, this guilty verdict is important. You know,
Yes.
It does provide some level of justice, but we can't necessarily get true justice, because, you know, George
Floyd can be brought back. Yeah.
Can't be brought back. But also, we need to make sure whatever happens needs to be some type of justice to where this never happens again.
Yes. And that's what I'm looking for. That lasting change. That this is not just going to be a moment in history or a moment in time. This is going to be an actual significant impact on white supremacy. That we start to go like, okay, maybe we really do need to look a little bit deeper into what we're doing. And that brings us to our next discussion here about Ma'Khia Bryant. Daquon, did you see that video?
I'm gonna be honest. I saw like the first few seconds and I was like, I can't watch this. I can't watch it.
It's sad, and I'm not laughing because of any, this is anything to laugh about, but it's just, it's so, the very same day that we are going through this whole thing, the very same day we get this verdict, injustice again, like, it's Daquon.
The math is not mathing.
At all. And it's just crazy to me, because we're saying this kind of, when I heard about the thing that happened with Ma'Khia Bryant, when I heard about the whole situation, I discussed a lot of it with my coworkers, and I had the conversation about, what happened and what that meant, and what could have been done differently. And I realized that as I was talking with them, I was finding myself aligning with the police officer in the conversation at first, because we were talking about, they were like, well, she was definitely going to kill him, and that was definitely not a question. He had to do what he had to do. She was going to definitely kill that girl. And part of me was like, well, maybe that is right. Well, maybe he did have no other choice, because it was a knife and was that. And then I was like, hold on, wait a minute, hold on, pause. No.
Yeah.
And I had to really think about why my train of thought went that way, because like I said, I was talking with a group of African Americans. And it just baffled me that we were both in the same, we were all I was sitting there trying to say, well, this should not have happened. And I was in Lonely Island. And I'm like, well, if my people are saying this is okay, is it okay? You know what I mean?
Right.
And it made me even doubt my own questioning of how the situation was handled. Because my first thought was that girl did not have to die for that. Exactly. Death was not the only option.
It was not.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's not the only option, but so many times we see something and it's like, oh, person in the wrong, it's justified. Like, that's not the case. You know, it's funny because, well, not actually funny, but
yeah, I know what you mean.
Ironic.
That's ironic. Irony. Yes, like.
Yeah, it's ironic because in so many situations where it's a white person doing the violence or the killing, it's always just like, we don't have the full story. We don't know everything going on. All of these different things, but immediately we see a Black person being violent, and all of a sudden that's their entire character. That's their entire personality. That's the only part of the story that we need to know, and that's not the truth. There's so many other layers to the story that we don't know, that we need to hear before coming down onto some type of conclusion. And even if the conclusion is that Ma'Khia Bryant did something wrong, death is not the only answer, because, you know, like I heard before, and like this country was founded upon, you know, people are innocent until proven guilty before a jury of their peers. They should not get the death sentence immediately without having that jury, that fair trial. And I think that it creates this bigger issue of like, how do police de-escalate situations? Like, Ma'Khia Bryant is a 16-year-old girl.
Yeah.
There are grown adults where if you hit them with a taser, they're going down instantly.
Yeah.
So there are all of these different situations where we need to think about, why is death our immediate go-to if there is a situation going on? Why isn't there de-escalation processes in play to make sure that, you know, we can solve a situation without trying to kill someone?
That's because, and I hate to say it, but the truth is, where the Constitution says, you know, innocent until proven guilty, I think it was only applying to white people when they said that. I think that in Black society, or in our culture, Black people are guilty until proven innocent.
If they're ever proven innocent.
If they're ever proven innocent in the first place. And it's very indicative of how deeply rooted, you know, white supremacy is in our society because of stuff like this. Because even in our own community, you know, I knew something was wrong with that story as soon as I heard it. But because I was arguing with people, and I was on Lonely Island, like, well, wait a minute. I mean, am I fucking up? Like, am I the one not seeing something here? Right. Because I was talking to people who looked like me, who were on the side of the officer. Yeah. And I just realized that, like I said, thankfully, I have people like Daquon in my life who's like, no, bitch, I got you. Don't worry about it. I got you, bitch.
We're here. We have these conversations all the time.
And so I was just really thinking, Daquon, tell me what you told me when I told you about that. What'd you tell me, Daquon?
I said white supremacy will have you in the sunken place.
And that's on period. Like, when I said that's on period, because the reality is, when I heard that conversation, when I heard what happened, my whole thought was, what the fuck else could he have done aside from shooting her? He could have tackled her. He could have shot the gun elsewhere. He could have shot her in her leg or shot her in her arm. He could have tased her. He could have, like, literally, you were a grown ass man. This is a 16-year-old girl. If you go, I mean, come on, bruh. If you telling me that your grown ass could not tackle a 16-year-old girl?
Right. But
And
y'all love slamming 16-year-old girls in the classroom.
Y'all love doing that. Y'all love doing that. But my thing was, I was talking to a police officer, a security officer at my job, and we were talking about this whole thing. And she was like, she told me, she was like, yeah, in the police academy, like in that stuff like that, they tell us to shoot center mass, shoot to kill. And I said, what the fuck? She was like, yeah.
The exact same thing.
And not just that, Daquon, when she was like, it's not, and she said, if you don't, you can be fired. You can lose your job if you do not. And she was saying, I don't agree with what happened. She was making sure, she was very adamant. She's like, I don't agree with what happened. But what I'm telling you is that in the system, if he did not shoot her, he would have been fired because of that. Because she was using quote unquote deadly force. And I just was like, when I say I was floored, Daquon, I mean, I knew this shit was here. Like I knew stuff like that was, you know, I'm sure it was in the policies, but to hear it from the mouth of someone in that field, to know that all of my fears were confirmed, it's just like, are you, what?
It's hard to hear. It's not surprising, but it's hard to hear.
And my thing was, I was like, well, what? And she said it herself. She was like, if I ever am in that situation like I have been before, I try to shoot their leg or their arm. And then she said this, and what really scared me, she was like, I have to lie to my superiors and say that I was aiming for the center mass, but they moved, so I accidentally shot him in the arm or the leg. So she has to justify not murdering someone, Daquon, to keep her job.
What a world we live in. We need to take a moment just to like let that sit. I need everybody listening to this, watching this, just like think about that. Having to justify not murdering somebody to keep your job.
Daquon, when I heard that, I was floored. I was like, and she said, she's like, I tried, and she said the same thing we did when we talk about the whole police system is corrupt. She's like, absolutely. She's like, it is. And there are no good cops or bad cops. It's all bad because the system is broken. Because this is the stuff that they teach us in the classes. She's a security guard, she's not a police officer, but she was like, yeah, I studied in that stuff, and I was like, it just this is what we learn. And I was so shook because I'm just like, this is what we're being, and then it's like the fact that you could lose your job for trying to protect someone or save someone. I can't even, like, I can't even. And the fact that in that situation,
this is what we mean by when we say that these things are systemic issues. It's literally built into the systems that are in play.
And the craziest part is that even in situations like Dylan Roof, and I keep bringing that up because I just really want people to know, like, it's not just the police officers, but it's also the conversations that surround these events. The fact that the first thing that we learn about Ma'Khia Bryant is that she was trying to attack this girl. She was trying to kill her. But when we hear stories about Dylan Roof, most of the conversations are about mental health, mental illness, or bullying, as if that justifies racism and murder and terrorism. But as society has taught us, white terrorism is just a display of mental illness.
Oh, say that again.
White terrorism is just a display of mental illness. It's not actually dangerous. Even if people die, it's not dangerous because they're white.
Right. But, and they're not trying to go after the systems that privilege them.
And that just really makes me realize, as a Black person, like, you know, in any situation we are in, and like I said, even learning more about the case, apparently Ma'Khia Bryant, in the situation, not that we needed to know this, but the facts are that she was trying to defend herself against a woman who was threatening to hurt her family, apparently, from what I've heard. And the fact that I had to research that, the fact that I didn't automatically know that from the news story, it's just like, something's wrong here.
Yeah.
Because we get a whole bunch of information about Dylan Roof and his personal life real quick in the media. But somehow, Ma'Khia Bryant, murderer, she's trying to kill people. She's a psychopath, apparently.
It's one of those things that I can't wrap my head around because, like, as an academic and like a researcher, I am trained to where if I'm making an argument, it doesn't matter what the argument is. I do have to show both sides. I may have to show why my side is more correct or the better way of approaching something, but I do have to make sure that I do my due diligence as a researcher and as an academic to make sure that the entire situation is being covered as best as possible. But we don't get that same thing reflected in the media. We don't get that same thing reflected in what's supposed to be information.
Just information, but once again, information is coded in bias. And this bias is age old, centuries old. And it's so ingrained in our society that it's second nature, even in our own selves. As like you said, we take on the traits of the oppressor. So there are African Americans like the ones that I spoke with who are so deeply enrooted in white supremacy, so deeply rooted in the struggles that we have that have been pressed upon us that we can't even see how dangerously uninformed we truly are.
Exactly.
And I really just saw how indicative that was, and how indicative that is of our life experience as African Americans, and how deeply this white history has reformed and structured and retooled our brain, and how we even look at situations. And the fact that in these conversations, hearing other African Americans, and the fact that we have to, as Black people, we have to seek out information about white supremacy and racism and oppression and always have to relate it back to our current situations or whatever's going on, because we have to always checks and balances it. Because we always have to see, okay, is this racism or is this, or is it this or is it that? And having to really dig into it to figure out, am I thinking as an African American, or am I thinking as an African American who has been indoctrinated into white society?
Mm. And that's the scary part. That's the scariest thing, that, you know, we go to people of our community to like be able to understand us, and like we see something and we're like, this isn't right. So we go to somebody who's like, who also should understand. But the scariest part is that they could be so indoctrinated by white supremacy that it creates a veil and they can't even see past white supremacy. They can't even see through and see what's happening in our society. And like, that's more scary than like the people who are like obviously just like putting on some front to like pick me master or whatever, where it's, you know, one of those situations where, you know, they're blatantly just like against any type of justice or any type of movement against anti-Blackness and racism, whatever. But like the people that we go to, the people that we think get us, and we go to them and we have these questions, and it ends up creating like this gaslighting type situation where it's like, am I crazy for thinking this? Am I the person that's just like seeing this?
Am I the problem?
Wrong. Am I the problem? Exactly.
And I'm so glad you brought that gaslighting up. I'm so glad you brought that up, because that's exactly what it felt like in that conversation. Because I had 4 different voices that looked like, and 3 of which looked like my own, 3 of which were African Americans telling me, no, you're wrong, you're crazy, she was blah, 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 whatever. And I'm just sitting there on, like I said, just like, okay, well, fuck my opinion, right? I guess I guess it's right. I guess it's whatever. And like I said, for a brief moment, for a brief hour or so, I was like, you know what? Maybe they're right. You know what? Maybe it is right. And then I just realized, and thankfully for me, it clicked. But like I said, I had to realize that this is how white supremacy stays in power. Because if they can tear down voices like mine or yours, or voices like that through people that look like us, and use them as a way to kind of make us feel like we're crazy. Because it's one thing to have a white person tell you that you're wrong about this. Like that one white person who was talking to me in that conversation. But her voice doesn't really matter to me because she doesn't look like me.
Right. She doesn't deal with the same issues.
Exactly. So I can brush off that. But when you see 3 other people who look just like you telling you, yeah, she's right. It's like I said, it's like it pulls you back in. And thankfully, I have friends like you in my life. Thankfully, I have educated myself on white supremacy, racism, oppression, stuff like that. Thankfully, I've sought out this information to like I said, to consistently do this checks and balances system in my brain. But I just saw in just one conversation, this is the scary part. In just one conversation, these 4 people in the span of maybe 30 minutes made me completely doubt everything that I had learned. Everything that I thought was right. Because it would have started with, well, that was okay and that was fine. Until finally it's like, well, they gotta fight Black people because we bad or whatever. And like that's how it starts. And yeah, that's a little bit extreme, but that's how it happens. That's how it's like this re-education. It's like they're re-educating us, like, no, you're wrong. No. Why what is it? You ever seen Pleasantville?
No, I haven't.
But it's like this idea of like this community that keeps pulling you back in. It's like a cult almost. It's like we're gonna make you this
supremacy.
Yeah, the cult of white hashtag the cult of white supremacy. And it's honestly, it's like this like I said, this re-education, this re-oppression, this way to kind of pull you back in to say, no, everything's okay. There is no war in Ba Sing Se. Like
not Ba Sing Se.
But that's what it is, and that's what it feels like. It's almost like being hypnotized, like you said, putting you in the sunken place. Because you've opened your eyes. You're aware of the reality in the world. You're aware of the racism that exists in society. You're aware of the oppression against African Americans. But when you're consistently fighting the same battle with seemingly no true growth and true pushback against it, and true change that is lasting and complete, the fact that as African Americans, we are still being killed, it makes you think, well, is it even worth fighting for anymore?
Right. And that's it's so real. And the scariest part is that it can happen to any of us. Like, even me having a whole degree in African American studies.
Pause right there. Say that one more time for the people in the back.
A whole degree in African American studies. I've graduated now. But for the past 4 years, I've spent extensive time studying Black people, our voices, our experiences, the oppression and the systems that we have to deal with. And I still have times where I have to pause and be like, am I thinking about this wrong? Is white supremacy getting to me? And I have to go back and really fine tune my own opinions and my own knowledge, because at the end of the day, a degree doesn't make me perfect. But also it's one of these situations where it's so ingrained in our society that everything will have you questioning your opinions and your ideas and your thoughts.
And that's the reason why I hate the fact that an African American studies degree has to even exist. The fact that you have to actually seek out our own history and that it's not taught to us as kids. Imagine just for a moment, Daquon, if the information that you learn within those 4 years for your African American studies degree was spanned across all the years of you growing up.
Right.
Imagine how that could have shifted your thinking at such a young age. Imagine how it could have changed the way you viewed yourself had you known this information so at a younger age. I didn't start starting to educate myself on African American issues and African American politics and stuff like that, and racism and stuff like that until well into college, just like you.
Right.
I had to seek out African American classes. I had to seek out, okay, well, let me learn more about my history. Let me learn more about, what being Black in America is like. The fact that we have to seek this out and it's not given. It's
to how problematic our education system is, but that's a conversation.
It's a whole other episode.
But we'll get to that.
Oh, we'll get to that one. But and like I said, the fact that the reality is, in this society that we live in, we are always in a battle to try to keep ourselves educated, to keep ourselves, because the reality is, I heard this quote and I thought this was so sickening, but like it was off of Sibling Rivalry, Bob and Monet Exchange. They were talking about, they was like, you are woke and you can be woke, but eventually you're gonna have to go to sleep. Eventually you're gonna not say something that's woke. Eventually you're gonna have your wokeness tested. And it's more about being aware of the fact that you are not fully woke all the time. It's about being aware that when you doze off sometimes, to snap out of it. Just like in that situation, I dozed off a little bit, but I snapped back out of it. I put myself back in my awareness, like, wait a minute, no. And so I want to ask this question, Daquon, moving back to the Ma'Khia Bryant situation. Do you think that necessary force is a thing? Do you think that there is a such thing as meeting force with the same force, or a deadly force?
Not in this situation. I think that is one of these things that, like we were talking about before, shooting center mass shouldn't be the standard. Like, that shouldn't be like the go-to thing of like, okay, this person is using some type of deadly force, shoot center mass. And I think that there's also these different situations of like, somebody has a knife and a gun, and you're bringing a gun to a knife fight. You automatically have power over somebody. But like you were saying before, why wasn't, some type of tackle being used? Why it wasn't some type of restraining hold, not a chokehold, a restraining hold being used?
Or disarming,
all of these different ways to, disarm the situation and bring it down. Like, why weren't these things being used? Like, deadly violence does not, beget deadly violence.
And I fully agree. I think when I saw that situation, because like I said, but the argument was like, well, she was going to kill that girl. She was definitely going to kill that girl. And it's kind of like, even if that was the case, how long was the police officer there? Was my first question. Did he arrive right when she was running at the girl? Was he on the scene? How long? Because that part of the conversation is muddled. That part is not really talked about as much. I tried when I found the information for it, and I was like, how long was he there before it even escalated to that point?
Right.
And if it did escalate to that point, tasers are a thing. And sometimes just shooting a gun, period, is enough to get people's attention.
Right.
And moving back to the fact of like, no restraint, no tackle, no disarmament was going on. It was Black girl equals death. Black girl,
jury, executioner.
Judge, jury, executioner. And the fact that this is encouraged and even worse than that, taught as the way to handle the situation, so much so that as people in society, we're like, most people are like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, him shooting her for using a knife, that makes sense. This grown-ass man not being able to take down a 15-year-old girl, that makes sense. The only way he could take her down was a gun. That makes sense. That makes sense. The fact that we have been so indoctrinated in this world to think that that is okay in policing, that's okay. And it's like the whole thing I was looking at in that situation, all I could keep thinking was like, this is what we doing? This is all we can do? Huh?
In 2021.
In 2021? We're still doing this. We're still not talking about this. And the fact that, once again, in truth, many things can be considered deadly weapons.
Exactly.
Not just knives, bats, certain kinds of metal poles, a crowbar, whatever. So are you saying if she was attacking her with a bat, would that mean she needed to be shot? If she was going to attack her with something, with a what, you know what I mean? Like, and all I keep thinking to myself was like, I don't understand what is the definition of deadly force?
Right.
Or where is the line of like, okay, there is no other option for me to take her down except this. Exactly. And like you said, they have no problem with tasing us, shit.
And it's one of those things where it's like you have to think in this situation, like, oh, she was using deadly force, she was going to kill her, so like that's all that the police officer could do. And you think back and it's like, well, if we think about it, does murder involve a death sentence? Because we've seen in very recent times, you had this person who stabbed a girl multiple times in the skull, killing her, and they got life in prison. So a murder does not always involve a death sentence. This is not condoning murder in any type of way, but this is some of the processes that's needed to, rationalize this thinking of like, oh, why do we think that like deadly force from a Black person always deserves a death sentence, but from a white person it could just mean imprisonment for life or something like that?
And I bring it up again. The facts are, once again, now, just like I said before in a previous episode, where I said a Black man who was accused of using counterfeit bills with no weapons is seen as more of a threat than a white teenager who has confirmed murdered people in a church. The same situation is true in this case, is that a 16-year-old Black girl who was trying to defend herself, from what we heard, is seen using a knife as more dangerous and needing to be, quote unquote, put down, more so than a white teenager nearing the same age who has semi-automatic weapons murdering people, who at the time when the police arrived on scene already was aware that people had died, but he was able to be taken in and serve his time, to stand before a jury of his peers.
Taken to Burger King.
Taken to Burger King. But Ma'Khia Bryant couldn't be given that same respect. Yet again, black children are dying because of white fear. Yet again, Black children have to suffer at the hands of white supremacy that sees them as completely dangerous and a threat, regardless of the situation, regardless of the conversations. We're still in 2021 having conversations about this situation as if this girl was some kind of psychopath just going to murder this girl for no reason.
Right.
Because Black people don't deserve to find it. We don't deserve people actually researching the situation. I mean, movies have been made about John Wayne Gacy and Jeffrey Dahmer's, documentary movies, all kind of stuff to get their side of the story. Why are they monsters? But Black girls and Black men and Black children, when things like this happen, they had a gun. It looked like a gun, Trayvon Martin. Breonna Taylor associated with the wrong people, so that means that she deserves to die, right? Apparently. George Floyd, accused of using counterfeit bills, has no weapon on him. He needs to die, right? That's the conversation we're having now. That's the reality we're living in still. So when people ask, is the Derek Chauvin verdict, is it something good? Is something to celebrate? In a way, yes. In a way, yes, but it still does not mean the conversation of tearing down white supremacy, the conversation about injustice is over.
It's not. It's really
Now,
not. And it's one of the things that's, I think that I get so frustrated in these situations because oftentimes people are like so quick to be like, all right, we have a verdict. Like, there's been so much going on and we can move past this and go back to normal. And it's like, what? Who's normal? I don't know her. Is she booked? Like, who is normal? I don't know what normal you're talking about. Because at the end of the day, the norm is to see Black people as monsters, is to kill Black people, is to see Black people in a light where they're always criminals, that they're always in the wrong, that they don't deserve justice. And if that's your normal, I never want to go back to that.
Ooh. Ooh. Say that for people in the back one more time, Daquon.
If that's your normal, don't want to ever go back to that.
Period. Point blank and simple. .com, .org, .sfrg. I don't know what else. But anyway. So many little boys and girls grow up never knowing the scope of their culture and what it has contributed to society and history. So it's time for a change. Let's take a pause, rewind, and remind the world just how we did that. Now, in the article, Little Known Black History Facts by PBS, we learn that inoculation was introduced to America by a slave. Few details are known about the birth of Omniscius, but it is assumed that he was born in Africa in the late 17th century before eventually landing in Boston. One of 1,000 people of African descent living in Massachusetts colony, Osmisius was a gift to the Puritan church minister Cotton Mather from his congregation in 1706. Omniscius told Mather about the centuries-old tradition of inoculation practiced in Africa. By extracting the material from an infected person and scratching it into the skin of an uninfected person, you could deliberately introduce smallpox to the healthy individual, making them immune. Considered extremely dangerous at the time, Cotton Mather convinced Dr. Zato Bollaston to experiment with the procedure when a smallpox epidemic hit Boston in 1721 and over 240 people were inoculated. Opposed politically, religiously, and medically in the United States and abroad, public reaction to the experiment put Mather and Bollaston's lives in danger, despite records indicating that only 2% patients requesting inoculation died compared to the 15% of people not inoculated who contracted smallpox. Omniscius' traditional African practice was used to inoculate American soldiers during the Revolutionary War and introduced the concept of inoculation to the United States. But let white history tell it, we ain't do shit. When baby, you got us to thank for the fact that the COVID-19 vaccine even exists, but let's not, I guess we don't want to go there, right?
Right.
Go ahead, Daquon.
All right, so in honor of Pride Month starting in just a few short days, I wanted to highlight some influential Black queer activists because, as you know, Pride started from protests. So let's talk about trans activist Quaviondre. This comes from Because of Them We Can, so you can go over there if you want to hear more. But Quaviondre is the founder of Gays and Lesbians Living in a Transgender Society, GLITS, which is an organization focused on providing holistic care to sex workers and members of the transgender community, while also fighting back against gender-based housing discrimination. Last year, Doroshow was able to finally bring a 30-year dream to life, creating a haven and making history as the first Black-owned housing complex for LGBTQIA plus communities in New York City. Her mission is to provide a safe space for the community while also assisting young people with securing better futures for themselves. At the opening ceremony, Dorshow stated that 30 years of a dream of doing something like this, but not just doing it, putting us in an area, in a location where we don't have to run. My community is being hunted all around the world. If I'm going to have a mission and a statement, my mission has always been to change the lives of my community, to infuse and get young people to rethink what a career is, to invest in ourselves so that we can see a better future.
Black women.
Right. Black trans women.
Black women, black women, black trans women, black women. I mean, come on.
Come on now.
But are we gagging so? Because she bring it to you every time.
Every time.
So, as always, thank you all so much for watching, and keep the conversation going down in the comment box below. Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up, and if you are listening to us on our podcast, please rate and review on whatever platform you're using. If you want to follow us on social media, our handles are at Andre Talks a Lot and at Daquon 950. Now, we'll see you all next week on the Melanin Margin, where the conversations about race are never off the table.
Never. Bye.